Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'm really happy to be able to stand in this place today and speak in support of Motion 111, which was introduced by my colleague, the member for Abbotsford, and the motion would establish the second week of September as Mennonite Heritage Week. I'm particularly pleased just because the way the motion has come up in the House of Commons. I didn't know if I'd had the opportunity to speak, and so I'm just so grateful that it has come up today and that I could be here. You know, Madam Speaker, so much of what I do in the House of Commons over the last 10 years has been pretty confrontational. My job, whether it's been in government or in opposition, has been usually mentioning other parties' names and talking about what they're doing to hurt the country and what we're doing to help the country. And so today I'm going to be just talking about a wonderful group of people, the Mennonite people, and it's not going to be partisan at all. So it really feels good to be able to do that, and I'm especially proud to be able to speak about Canadian Mennonites and be able to honor them and highlight the wonderful things that Canadian Mennonites bring to our culture in Canada and truly bring to the world. So I'm going to be speaking a bit personally about how important this legislation is to Canadian Mennonites because I'm from southern Manitoba and I'm a Mennonite myself, although I never really had thought about myself as a Mennonite because I grew up in a Mennonite community with Mennonite parents, but we always went to the Pentecostal church. So growing up in Morden, Manitoba, going to the Pentecostal church, we were not quite considered Mennonites. We were a little charismatic, and of course Mennonites, there's a range, but Mennonites are very humble and they are not overly expressive. So we were seen as being a little bit out there, being Pentecostals. But you know, as my honorable colleague from the NDP just talked about, really what it came down to was our faith in Jesus Christ and our belief in loving God and in serving God and our common beliefs around our Christian faith. And so truly, as I grew up and I was part of the Pentecostal church, many of my friends were part of the Mennonite church, and we really were brothers and sisters in our faith, as well as many of the things that we believed were important. But it's only as I've gotten older, I guess, and even being a member of Parliament here, where I'm just every day and anytime I can tell somebody that I'm from a Mennonite background and talk about things like our history, our music, our food, our culture, our sense of humor, our compassion, and really when I say I mean so many good Mennonite people that I know. I'm just immensely proud to be a Mennonite and so proud that this motion was brought forward. Before I continue, Madam Speaker, would you be so kind as to just give me a warning when I've got about 2 minutes left? Thank you so much. It's funny because when my colleague, the member for Abbotsford, was first talking about bringing this motion forward, we actually sort of joked about it because Mennonites are typically very humble and don't want a lot of attention brought to themselves. I think if you would look at the history of Mennonites, you would see how they've been victimized, they've been persecuted, they have risen above that persecution, but they've never asked for an apology, they've never asked for restitution, they never want accolades, they just want to put their head down, put their shoulder to the wheel as it is, and just keep working hard for their families, for their community, for their God, for their country. So when the member from Abbotsford talked about bringing this forward, we sort of chuckled because we really weren't sure if he was fully serious because, well, we're Mennonites after all. We don't have Mennonite Heritage Week. But you know what? I'm so happy. He was serious, and we very much support him in this motion. And so even though Mennonites are humble people, I'm really happy that we can talk about Mennonites to the extent that we are today. I want to talk just briefly about some of the struggles that Mennonites had to face. Of course, Mennonites have migrated across Europe. They came out of the faith of a man named Mennonite. Mennonites believed and still believe that baptism should happen as an adult, that it would be adults, and when you're an adult, you can decide if you want to follow the Christian faith and be baptized as an adult. They also were very strong believers in peaceful, in pacifism, and not going to war. And so for those reasons, over many years, they had to migrate across Europe because they were persecuted. And so I want to just talk a little bit about the struggles even they had because they were brought to Canada. In order to have a clear understanding around the struggles of the Manitoba Mennonite community specifically, I want to talk just briefly about the history of them. The very first group of Mennonites arrived in Manitoba from Eastern Europe during the summer of 1874. And you know what, proudly, those would be some of my ancestors. I'm almost a fourth generation Canadian because my grandmas and grandpas arrived here when they were a year old or so in mid-1800s, probably even before 1874. And they settled on reserves east and west of the Red River. Between 1923 and 1929, over 25,000 Mennonites managed to immigrate. And although more wanted to come, in 1930, the Canadian government closed the door to Mennonites. It goes without saying that our modern Canada was built by immigrants, many of them fleeing war, strife, persecution, and economic devastation. The Mennonites are certainly amongst that group of people who came to find refuge in Canada. And I think it's a reason why Mennonites have been on the forefront and leading the way of being private sponsors and helping refugees who are coming to Canada now. Amongst other things, Mennonites have been their church organizations, private business owners. I know for sure in my riding of Portage Lisgar, there are so many private individuals who have banded together and are supporting refugees who are fleeing from persecution in the Middle East and in other areas, because they have such a strong sense of what it means to be persecuted many times, the majority of times because of your faith. And so they have been at the forefront of welcoming and helping refugees in Canada. There are two particular groups of Mennonites that arrived in southwest Manitoba, 14 families in one, 8 in another. These Mennonites arrived with nothing but the clothes on their back and Bibles in their hands. Although they had no money, they still managed to secure land without making so much as a down payment. Instead, they promised half of their gross annual income until the purchase price and interest were covered. And that's the way Mennonites did it then and do it now, Madam Speaker. They will set their mind to doing something. Possibly it is a problem that they themselves need solved. They will find that solution, and I think of so many industries in my riding, for example, Mennonites who are farmers, and they might have a problem with their equipment or might have something that's not working properly. And so they are incredibly innovative, and they find a solution and they create a widget or create a gadget to fix their agricultural, their combine or other type of tool that they need. Then their neighbor sees it and says, will you make one of those for us? Because we really like that. And they sell it to a neighbor, and before long, literally, usually within just a few years, there is another small business that's been sprung up out of Mennonites. I can't believe I already talked for 8 minutes, and that was my 2-minute mark. I'm getting a little bit more. This must be the sign of a Mennonite. So I'm gonna say this. Just how incredibly hardworking. So their expansion through southwestern Manitoba saw the creation of communities like Winkler, Plum Coulee, Rosenfeld, Altona. Many of those are in my riding of Portage Lisgar. I want to just touch briefly on a couple of things. So Mennonites not only have been through so much persecution, but one of the few things that just are making Mennonites unique, the food, Mennonite food. I don't know any other culture where a meal is deep fried dough, which we call Rollkuchen, and watermelon, which is Rebus in German. Rollkuchen and Rebus, that's what we would eat for supper. Deep fried dough and watermelon. And if the dough wasn't sweet enough, you dip it in a bit of syrup, which is very good. Veronica, which is cottage cheese boiled, and you have that with schmotfat and farmer sausage. But I also have to talk about the sense of humor that Mennonites have. Music, we love music. You go to a Mennonite funeral and you will hear the most beautiful music ever from the congregation. I want to close, though, Madam Speaker, with some headlines from a wonderful website called the Daily Bonnet, which is Mennonite humor. If you're a Mennonite, you're going to get these headlines. I won't try to explain it, but I will just read the headlines from the Daily Bonnet, written by Andrew Unger from Steinbach. Here's one. Sound of Kanakin Zote used as Mennonite mating call. Quilt cartel jacks up prices at Mennonite relief sale. Left lane between Steinbach and Blumenort to be designated slow minivan lane. New Bothwell residents arrested for putting processed cheese on his burger. Mennonites rush to get their cars outside during hailstorm. Here's a good one. Dating Mennonite couples solidify relationship by sharing co-op number. Oh, yeah. Canucks oat found in last summer's jean shorts, still perfectly edible, says local man.
Unfortunately, the time is up, and does the honourable member have unanimous consent to give one more? Yes.
Shane, that's Mennonite for one more. Google honors Mennonites with farmer sausage logo, which isn't true, but thank you. I'm so proud of Mennonites. Thank you.